a good number of the RCPs in the attendance now. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's Lunch and Learn session on SMS. My name's Ben Decker, Sales Engineer at STCR, and as always, joined by Jen Fairley-Custer, one of our support account managers, who will be leading today's session on buying and receiving best practices. At STCR, we've been supporting the technology needs of grocers for over 56 years now. Believe that ongoing training is essential to meet the ROI target you have with a new POS and retail control system. This is why we've put together this monthly webinar series to help address and provide ongoing training in some key areas within the SMS solution. These will happen at the last Thursday of every month, and we will continue to cover the topics within SMS that are most common for our support center to receive questions on from our customers all over the country. Today, we're going to be going over buying and receiving within SMS, and Jen will take you through a purchasing and receiving cycle and DSD best practices. We welcome and are happy to take any questions via the QA function along the way, and we'll answer them at the end of Jen's presentation. STCR is dedicated to providing quality training support to all of our customers and hope this continues to serve as a great resource for you and your staff as a reference point moving forward. We want to empower you to take full advantage of SMS and all that it has to offer for your store. Like all of our other sessions, today is being recorded, and you'll be able to view all these webinars at a later time. You will get those links to these webinars the day after the recording is finished going up. With that, we'll go ahead and pass off to Jen to start the session. Jen, take it away.
Thanks, Ben, for that introduction. As he stated, today's webinar is going to focus on buying, receiving, and DSD and best practices within that. I want to preface this with this is going to be a best practice, so we're going to be looking at some ways to help you enhance buying and receiving if you're already utilizing this, and or if you're starting to get ready to do buying and receiving, some practices that can help you get ready faster and have you more prepared for when you're wanting to implement this. So I have up on the screen here, we're actually going to start in the back office. Everything when we're doing buying and receiving and DSD really stems first from the item maintenance and the cost record. So there's some fields I want to go over in the cost record that will help you when you're doing purchase smoother. Right here, I have a couple items pulled up in my cost record. The first part is you have to have it attached to a valid vendor. So our vendor ID right here is 507. We need to make sure that that's actually a vendor that exists in our vendor table. So up here, I have our vendor table. I can go through. Yep, 507 is a valid vendor, so I can now receive this item. Some more information you might want to look at while you're in here that can help you, obviously, is making sure that you're maintaining base cost and case size, because that's what calculates price. And then the unit of measure field. You need to be able to receive this item in a way other than cases. By default, it's going to be, I want to define that right here. If there's nothing in here, it's going to assume cases and only let you cases. If you are looking to receive this item by cases and units, you can come in here and you can say cases and one. If it's a weighable item like produce, bananas, you can then switch it to just be received by weight and it will update right in here. Another feature in here is you do have the ability to purchase from more than one vendor. Very commonly, if an item is out of stock with one vendor, you're going to want the ability to be able to purchase it from two vendors. You can have as many
Hi,
vendor
Jen,
records as
excuse
you
me.
want attached to an item. Yes.
Real quick, just had a comment here that's a little hard to hear you. Wondering if there's any way you can increase your volume.
Is that better? I got it full blast.
It is coming in louder for me. If it is still a little quiet, please go ahead and let us know again in the QA. Thank you.
Sorry about that. But as I was saying, you can have more than one vendor that you're purchasing it from, so you can have more than one vendor attached to an item. This item right here, this number 2, is actually telling me I have 2 vendor records attached to this item. So if you see the scroll bar over here, you'll see I have 2 vendors. I can purchase this from both Danone and from Nestle. And you can maintain 2 different costs. So if that's something, you have an item that can be received from more than one vendor, that's something you want to set up, all you need to do is on the item, you just push plus button to add a new vendor. You say no, and then you can go ahead and attach yet another vendor to this item if you need to, and then you can receive from that vendor as well. As soon as you're doing that, however, there is a flag right here called authorized vendor. If you are going to be doing more than one cost record on your items, it is very important that you make sure that you're flagging one of them as the authorized vendor. This comes in on a few different places. Specifically, if you're running any reports and you're looking at the database cost for an item, this is going to be what the database cost is. It's going to take it from the authorized vendor flag. Also, there is the ability to go ahead and make an open vendor, which we'll get into in a moment, where you can receive items from different vendors in one invoice, in one purchase document, in one DSD document. And if you are going to utilize that option and split the purchase order receiving document into separate ones by vendor, it's going to go off the authorized vendor flag. And I'm going to show you how to create an open vendor so you can do this, and I'm going to show you how to split it, because it is something that's very useful. So that's the main things I wanted to focus on in the item part. On the vendor table part, there's a few other things I wanted to show you as well. You can come into the vendor in your vendor list, and if you open up the details, there's a few things in here I wanted to show you. The first one is the categories. You can go into a vendor and you can define this vendor as an any vendor. What does that mean? Is that usually when you're creating any sort of purchasing, receiving, or DSD document, it is vendor specific. So when you're going to go in, you're going to create a document, and it's going to be tied to one specific vendor, and you can only receive order from that specific vendor. An open vendor means I can purchase, receive from any vendor so that means I can purchase and receive any item that has a cost record tied to it. It gives you a lot more flexibility. So generally, it's a good idea to have one vendor listed as your open vendor. The way you do that is you create a new vendor. You don't have to call it open. I call mine open so I remember. And then in the categories, we put any. The second field I wanted to show you is this profile. This comes up a lot as a question, is I have a lot of vendors in my system. I have a couple hundred vendors in my system, but I want my grocery manager to come in and just see the vendors that they generally order from, or my dairy manager, or my deli manager. So that way it simplifies it. They don't see the hundreds of vendors. They only see the 10, 15 vendors that they use. You can make a profile. So you would come in, profiles can be alphanumeric. I tend to say keep it simple. And you just use this right here, and you just, for example, I'm using this as my grocery. I go and put that in all of the vendors that are part of the grocery profile that I want to show up for my grocery manager. And then once I'm done, I actually go into the operator record. And then on the operator record, so I have Johnny pulled up in my operator record right here. He is my grocery manager. So that means I would put in here in his profile on his operator grocery under the profile. So this way he can come in when he's creating a purchase order or receiving document or DSD document, he can pull up a list of just his vendors. He can also pull up all of them, but it does give him a way to slim it down. So I'm going to go away from item maintenance, and because those are the fields I kind of wanted to highlight, and we're going to go into actually creating the purchase order documents and receiving documents and DSD documents. So if you're unfamiliar, everything for this is going to go through SMS. So in SMS, all of this is actually under the Buy tab. And under Buying, we have the extended module on the left-hand side. When you come in here, this is where all of the documents that you're going to be using for purchasing, buying, receiving, or bill. So kind of as a quick overview, you have the purchasing, receiving, and billing documents. These three actually will flow together. I will show you how that's going to work, because that's a good idea to use when you're utilizing the buying and receiving. You don't have to, but it's a good idea. It's a good best practice if you want to have them flow right through the system. The other one is deliveries. This is very commonly referred to as DSD, direct store deliveries. They shortened it to just deliveries in here. Whereas purchasing is its own document, receiving is its own document, and billing is its own document, DSD is considered an all-in-one document. It is both a receiving and billing document built into one. While it will receive items into the store, it has no tie-in to these three documents. And I'm going to show you and then explain to you how that works and some little hints and best practices when you're doing this. So to start with, I'm going to start with showing the flow with the purchasing, receiving, and billing. So if you go into the purchasing document, I'm going to highlight right here, you have new orders, all vendors, and then the new order, my vendors. Just went over the idea with the profile. So if you have your grocery manager coming in here, going back to that same example, if I was logged in under that user and I only wanted to see the list of vendors, that would be how I could pull it up. My vendors are the ones that are attached to me by my profile. They will still have the ability up here to go ahead and look at all vendors as well, but it's a nice way to simplify. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go ahead and start creating an order. By default, when you do all vendors, obviously you're going to see all the vendors in the list. You have a few different ways to look it up. You have the manual code down here. You also have the search up here. I'm going to go ahead and create one from our Nestle. So I'm going to create one right from the Nestle Enterprise. It brings us into the header. The only thing that you need to worry about in the header is the starred order date. So the date right here is the only date that really matters for this document. The other ones are informational. So if you wanted to change this date, so if you're making an order for today, but you really are making it for next week, you're making an early order, or for tomorrow, you can change that date. The rest of these are informational. The start is the only one that matters. Reference number, PO number, document number, they're all going to stay the same. They're all pre-populated for you, as well as it's going to show you what operator closed and or started this document. Most of the work that comes into play is under your Items tab. When you're creating any sort of document for buying and receiving, everything's tied to the vendor. So when I go into the Items tab, it's going to show me all of the items that I can potentially order. So since I picked a specific vendor, it's only going to show me the items I can purchase from that vendor. These are all items that have a cost record attached to my 507 vendor. A couple different ways you can look it up. Right here is your manual code. If you have a hand scanner attached, you can scan in an item in the back office. You can hand key in a UPC number, whatever works best. And then you can put the quantity that you would like to order. I always like to draw attention to this lookup number. A lot of people do use the UPC code by default to look up all their item information, but there is also the ability you can look up items by UPC code, alternate code, or vendor code. So if you generally refer to your items when you're doing purchasing as the vendor code, you can go ahead and actually look them up by vendor code. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. All 3 of them in here, 1, 2, 3 means you'll be looking up by all 3 of them. So it's an easy way that you can go ahead and start looking up by a different way if UPC number isn't working for you. You can also just find the item on the list. You can just double click on the item and then you can put the cases down here that you're ordering. So we're going to build a quick order. So I'm going to just order 5 cases and I'm just going to go ahead and order 6 cases of my power juice and we'll say 4 cases of my beef. Anything on the top portion is document specific. So everything up here is document specific. So this is the cost for this document. It is pulling it from the database, but if there's something that you need to change, maybe you're noticing, that's not right. I don't get 8 per case. I get 10 per case. And you just want to change it on the fly for this document, do that right here. And it will not affect the database. It only affects the document that you're working on. The general rule of thumb is anything above this line is document, and anything below this line is your database. So if you're fixing it up here and you're saying, I want to go fix that in the database, you can, of course, go open the same item in SMS Pro. But if you wanted to do it right here while it's pulled up, these tabs right here, item, price, cost, these are your database. So I can go into cost and I can adjust that case size right here, and it's going to affect the back office, the database. So next time I do an order, it will automatically have this new information in it. If I just change it up here, it won't. It has to be changed down here to affect the back. A couple other quick things to look at while you're in here. If you're wanting to check as you're ordering, there's some tabs down here that can help you know if you really need to order these. You have a movement and you have a sales tab. This is going to show you the movement of the item throughout the system. So it will show you any that are already on order, any that have been received, what has been sold, any adjustments, and give you all the times this item has moved within the system. And you can go back by week, by month. You can show it by unit, by cases, or you can just see sales. So I'm ordering 4 cases of this, but I haven't sold this item in months. So maybe I want to downplay my order, things like that. A common misconception is up here when you're going from items to lines is that this is the same thing. They are not the same thing. Items are going to show you all the items that are available to be ordered in the system from this vendor. Lines are going to show you only the items that are on this document. So these are the 3 items that I have ordered. And it's a nice way to double check. So I can come in here and actually double check that, okay, I did mean to order 5 cases, 6 cases, 4 cases, and you're streamlining it down to just the items that you've gone through and ordered. Everything else down here stays the same. You can still make adjustments. You can lower your cases ordered. You can raise it, whatever it is that you need to do. Everything at the bottom stays the same, but it just defines it down to just the items that you've already scanned and put into this document, this purchase order document. You can then go into totals. You can print the invoice right here or the purchase order. You can mark the entire thing as voided, so that way if this was just practice or you're training people, you can void it all out. And then you can also close the order right here. So I'm going to go ahead and close the order because I want you to see how this can flow through the system. So once you close the order, now you've printed it out, you send it out to your vendor, and now you've actually gotten all of the merchandise in, so you're going to receive it. If you closed a purchase order, you can come into receiving and you can build a purchase order from, receiving document from a closed purchase order. You can also do an entire new standalone receiving document. You can do new receiving, pick your vendor, and just scan in items and just receive. You don't have to have a purchase order. It can stand on its own, but I'm going to show you how it can flow through. So you would just come in, this yellow button says from orders, and it's going to show you all the closed orders that have not been received yet in the system. So here's the order we just built and just closed. So we're going to highlight that and we're going to click open. And now it's got those 3 items that we just purchased and it brought them right into a new document, a receiving document. So now we can receive them. Just like the purchase order, it starts us right off on the main page. Just like the purchase document as well, if you go into lines, it's only going to show you the lines that are on the document. By default, it brought everything in that was ordered in the same cases that were ordered. Items, however, gives you the ability, just like with that document, where you can add more. So maybe you got some more merchandise from the vendor and you need to add it to this. You said, you know what? They sent me an extra case of Power Juice apple, and I'm going to go ahead and take it. You know, I need that anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and receive that. And now when I go into lines, I have another line that I've received 1 case of this. You also have the ability here to go ahead and make any changes that you need to. So maybe you did not get the 4 cases of the beef, so you only got 3. You can change that. That way you're shorted and you're not going to be receiving in something that you didn't actually get. Sometimes vendors have shortages, so sometimes you're going to get short or over what you ordered. Once everything is set, once you're sure everything is in here correctly, you can go into totals. You can print what you were shorted. So since we built this from a purchase order document, you can see what you were shorted. You can delete the entire invoice. The reason why is that receiving is when you actually add the items to your inventory, because you're receiving the items in at this time, so they are presumably coming through the back door and being added to your inventory stock and getting sold. So when you close a receiving document, this is when it's added to inventory. So they added the delete option in case you're training, in case you built a receiving document you didn't mean to. You won't have it sitting there suspended. You can delete it so it's not in the system and nobody gets confused. You can close the receiving, and then you can also print labels on receiving. So all of the items that are in this receiving document, you can actually go ahead and click label on receiving, pick your template, and go ahead and print 1 label per item, 1 label per quantity received. And you can have the label so that way they can go right out to the sales floor. When you close the receiving, this is when you are going to affect inventory. If you're not quite ready to, there is the suspend option, which leaves the document in an open suspended state. That means that it hasn't affected inventory yet, and then you can make changes to it. If I suspend it, it will show up as an open document right here, and I can go back and make changes to it. As a matter of best practice, we do strongly recommend that you close the receiving as close to the day as you got the items into the store as possible. There is a 1-week grace period built into the system. You can go back and close invoices about a week old. After that, the system won't allow you to. It'll say it's out of date. And the reason for that is when you close a receiving document, you are affecting inventory. So if the receiving document was built, we'll just say the 19th of last week, and you go and close it today, you're affecting the inventory from the 19th. Now, you're upping the inventory on the 19th, and it could cause issues going forward. That's why it's the week grace period, because everything's written usually in a weekly manner to your database, so it can adjust and correct itself within that same week period. Anything longer than that, we have to go back and do some recalculations. So just as a matter of best practice, it is a good idea to close the receiving document generally the same day, if not the next day. That way, you're not going back too far to affect inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and go through, and we're going to close this receiving document. Now all of that's added to my back office inventory. The last step is billing. Again, you can build a billing document on its own. You can come in, you can click new billing, you can click on your vendor you need to bill out to and just create a document, a standalone document. But if you're following the flow and you want to see all 3 steps, you want to have the purchasing to receiving and then the billing to see what you paid to that vendor, then you can grab it right from a closed receiving document. So just like with the receiving, with the yellow button from order, same color, it's yellow button from receiving, and you'll see all the closed receiving documents that have not been billed out yet. So there's the one that we just built. We're just going to go ahead and open that. We're going to build our billing document. The one thing that's different with the billing document, it brings us right to totals. The reason why is that you can't really add items to a billing document. You've already closed the receiving document. That's when inventory is added to the system. So you've already added the inventory to the system. So if you go back into items, you'll see it that looks quite different. You can't really add an item in here. If you go back to lines, you can see the items that you ordered and were received, but I can't make any adjustments now. That is no longer an option because it's already been received into the system. What they do give you is if there was something wrong, is you can do adjustments up and down. You can add to the bill and subtract to the bill. So you can't exactly add the items or subtract the items, but you can add taxes, shipping fees, or just do a general adjustment up. You can also do the same thing with subtract from bill. You can do if there was a bottle return, an allowance that was missed, or just a rebate, or you can just do an adjustment down. Just a dollar amount adjustment down with just a reference as to why you got this adjustment down. Maybe the vendor decided to cut you a deal, something like that. There was damaged product you didn't catch. You can put damaged product and negate that off of here. You can then print the final bill, hand to the vendor with your check, and you can charge it. So before you close any billing document, it does have to say that you've paid the vendor in full. So my invoice was $1,012.93. It's going to automatically fill that into the amount that I did. And then now I can close the bill. And that has gone through now all 3 steps. I've ordered it, I've received it, and I billed it out to the vendor and I paid it off. The other, we'll say, flavor of doing purchasing and receiving is DSD, direct store deliveries, or called deliveries. As I stated before, DSD is an all-in-one document that really combines the receiving and billing portion of what we just did. There's no ordering for this because you wouldn't have an order, receive, and bill all in one, so it's just receiving and billing. So I'm going to go ahead and walk through this, and I'm also going to show you how the open vendor works, so you can see how that works. And this will work in any of the documents we just went over with the purchasing and the receiving. So for our delivery, we're going to go and create a new delivery. And now I'm going to choose that open vendor so you can see how this can work for your system. I'm going to do an open vendor. This looks pretty much the same. I still get the document header. I still have the invoice number. It still gives me the document type. And when I go into items, now I have all the items available in the system that have a cost record tied to it. That's all it needs. I don't have to worry about being a Nestle vendor. So you can see a lot more are in here when we're scrolling through. I have all the items in my system that have a valid cost record attached to it, and I can now receive those items in. I can now add those items to my document. So I can come in and I can add my cigarettes. I can order or receive 5 of those. And on top of that, I can also get bananas in the same order, right? I can get 5 cases of bananas. I can also get my meatloaf. And you can, what this allows you to do is maybe you're getting a mixed pallet. Maybe you're having a vendor come in that sells multiple different, multiple different brands that they get from other vendors, something like that. And you can just build one document. So what can happen with this is obviously it can get a little bit confusing. It makes it a lot easier, but it can get a little bit confusing as you have all these different vendors now in one document. How are you supposed to know what you're supposed to owe these vendors? How do you know what to pay? So I'm going to go into my lines just so you can see the items that are only in this, just like before. The items is everything available, lines is everything on the document. And this is everything that's in here now. So I have a very wide variety, probably from multiple different vendors. I can close this document as is and then sort it out later, figure out what I owe each vendor later, or the system can do it for me. Right up here, there's a button called Divide. When I click on Divide, it actually is going to show me these are the vendors that I have in this invoice right now. I have 2 items from this vendor. I have 1 item from this vendor, 1 from this, 1 from this, and it will create separate DSD documents for each of these vendors. All I have to do is click the Start Process, and then it was going to go ahead and say, do you want to move all these items to their authorized vendor? I'm going to click OK in just a second to show you, but I want to make sure I'm bringing your attention to the fact that it says authorized vendor. This is, again, where that authorized flag comes into play. If you have more than 1 vendor attached to an item, this is where the authorized vendor comes into play. You cannot pick the secondary vendor. It will automatically go to the authorized vendor. So I go ahead and click OK. And then what happens is I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. I have no more items left in this document. This document is now completely empty. So I can come in and I can either suspend or close it. I'm just going to close it. And it's going to bring me back to show right to the Direct Store Deliveries tab. And now looking at my open vendor, I now have, open document. I now have an open document for all 4 of those different vendors. And I can go through. So there's my Nestle. I can go through and open that. And there's the 2 items that were split from that document. And I can go ahead and I can close this out. I can go to totals. Because it is a billing document built in, I also have to pay the vendor. So I do have to cash, check, drop payment, whatever form of payment I'm paying. So I'm just going to go ahead and say charge to account, and I'm going to charge the full $416.68. And then I can close the delivery. So now I have the other 3 that I can go through, and I can finish up those as well. This works for every document like I just showed you. So in the purchasing, you can split it up. The receiving, you can divide it up. I'll just go into an old order right here, open. When I go into, you see the divide option is there. So if you're using the open vendor, this is very useful, like I said, with DSD. It's also useful if you're creating a purchase order. Sometimes you're just going to hand your employee a gun, or a scanning gun. They're going to go out to the aisle and they're just going to scan all the holes that they see. They are running low at this item. They have, they're out of stock on this item. They can just scan the item in order, scan the item in order. This way, they're not trying to worry about what vendor it is. They just know they need that item. So they can go under the open vendor, then they can come back and you can go into the purchase order document and divide it up between the authorized vendors to know who to order it from. So that is the highlight of what I did want to show you for some best practices. Ben, did we get any questions in?
Yes, Jen, awesome. Great job. A couple of questions came through here. The first one, is there a way that we can email the purchase order directly to the vendor?
Yes. If you're set up to, under purchasing, you may have seen when I was going through, I'll just do another one real quick. Back to our Nestle. I know I have a lot of items under there. When you're going under here, there is the ability to transfer. If you have a email set up, we can set up an exchange file email that will use an email, like your Google email is usually easiest, and we can have that as a button. You can then email it out. You would need to have the vendor record with an email in there. That's in the going back to our vendors. So you would need to have that information in here first, but yes.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any useful reports, reportings that you recommend that's useful for the purchasing cycle?
Yes. So if we're in SMS Pro, underneath our reports, most of our reports for buying and receiving are going to fall underneath vendor since it is vendor specific. So if we go into the vendor dropdown, a lot of the reports that I like to highlight are usually under the inventory specifically for the purchasing and receiving portion of it. These are going to be you're going to be able to reprint any of those invoices that we just went over. You have your vendor invoice with cost GM, with margin to get that information. A really useful one that I've seen that a lot of people like is this purchase history by vendor. What this allows you to do is you can pick your vendor or range of vendor and your range of dates. And what this will show you is, I'm going to click on here, is all the purchases in that date range and what your ending inventory was. It also is going to show you any allowances, rebates, discounts, returns you may have gotten from those vendors in that time period. So you can really track over whatever time period you're looking for to see how much you're purchasing from a vendor and what kind of deals and discounts you may be getting. It's a good way, if you're seeing that you're purchasing a lot from vendors, you can go back to them and be like, hey, I've been purchasing a lot. Is there any like rebates or allowances? I'm not seeing you offering those that we're missing, kind of things that you can go back to the vendor with. And you can track this just like with any report in SMS. You can run this by day, week, month, year to really get a good look in the history.
Awesome, Jen. So the other question that we had here is there any triggers or notifications in place if you have limits set on the inventory of certain products? So if it gets below a single case in your store, it'll kind of notify your buying team?
We do have a suggested ordering. The way that this is set up is actually there is another table underneath your item drop down. It's the inventory right here. And you can set your minimum units and your trigger units and your maximum units in here. So this would be by item. You can come in and say, like don't want to drop below a certain minimum amount of units. You can set the trigger units, which can be the quantity you want to order, and your maximum unit that you want to have on hand. And when you're building your purchase orders, you can use those triggers. So I'm just going to go into build a new order, pick them, and then when we're in items, you can go into search items. And then right here is your suggested algorithms. So you can come under here, and then this is where you can see under minimum order trigger quantity. You can set that minimum amount in that table, and it drops below that minimum. You'll order the trigger quantity back to maximum, so you can just set a maximum amount that you want to keep on hand all the time, or you can set under minimum back to maximum. So you can use it in a few different ways, so that way the system will see that it dropped below what you have defined as the minimum amount you want, and it will suggest that you order them. So you would come in, we'll just say under minimum back to maximum, launch. And then I might not have too many as a suggested order in here because I don't have it set up, but you will come over here. I do have a few items, and it tells you the suggested amount that the system is suggesting you order in order to get whatever algorithm you've chosen. So I said under minimum back to maximum. So to get me back up to the maximum, it's suggesting I order 7, and I've dropped below the minimum. This works vendor specific. This also works under the open vendor if you wanted to just do an open all order to see all the suggested orders within your system. But there is a little bit of setup involved in setting up those minimum and maximums on each item.
Awesome. All right, well, another question came through here, Jen. The question is, what about ordering from large distributors like ShopRite that have their own ordering guns? Is there a way to integrate those to SMS?
Yes, we actually work with a lot of systems like that. What they do is they can actually provide a electronic invoice, and you can import that into the system. So when you are actually, whatever way you're wanting to do this, so you can actually, I've seen a few different setups. You're ordering it with the Scan Genius gun or the other gun, and you're building the order, and then when it comes in, the vendor will send us an electronic invoice that drops into SMS. So you can come into receiving, and under document, there's an import. And the import will bring up a list of available invoices that are sitting there ready to be imported in, and it will bring that into the system, and it's just like a normal receiving purchase billing document that we just went through. So we'll come in there and add all the items into one of them, and you can double check it to make sure it's correct, make sure you received all the items they said that they sent, and then you can go ahead and close it to add it to your inventory. And the only additional step on your side would be you have to go into that document and then click on import, which will give you the list, or import in all of the available receiving purchase order documents that your vendor has made available.
Awesome. That's super, Jen. Thank you so much. Looks like we got another question coming through here. The question is, if you have a large receiving department, how do you keep track of which ones you've verified?
By verified, you mean the ones that you've received in? I'm going to, the ones that you've received in, so I'm going to go with received in, if you want to clarify that question. But if you've come in and you've received any of your documents from one of your main vendors and you're getting a lot, you can look at a list of open and closed. So open ones are going to be ones that have not been done. They have not been verified yet. Closed is going to be the list of all of the ones that you have closed. And this stays in the system for 30 days. So you can come back and look at all of the closed, and you can bump that up, of course. This will show you a list of all the receiving documents that you've closed, so you can verify that that you've seen them and they've come closed.
Okay, Jen. So they clarify, they're saying if it's a very large order with several pallets, but they're not all coming in on the same truck. You want to receive in the first truck, but that's not the entire order.
So receive in the first truck and then keep it all in the same document.
Right. So one order, but two trucks, will say, bringing in that one order at different times.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, so you can easily come in and you would have let me just go into my open ones. You would have the open receiving document. So you come in, you scan all the items if this was built from the purchase order, or if you're just scanning a new. You finish the first truck, you're not quite ready to do the second truck, you can then suspend the document. So suspend it, and it will show up as an open invoice. So then when you're ready to receive the second truck, you would just go right back in there, say, there's my document, open it back up and start adding in more items. As long as the document is suspended, you can continue to add items. If you are receiving like 3 or 4 trucks, you can suspend them multiple times and open them back up, and then keep on scanning and adding the new items right into the invoice or receiving document. I use invoice as generic, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Jen. So hopefully that's a little bit clear on your question. If not, please feel free to send me an email if you're looking for more clarification on that scenario. My email address should be visible here on the screen, bend@stcr.com. Want to make sure that we're answering the question as you have it. Okay. Thank you for your question. All right. Okay, Jen, another question came through is, can they delete an invoice that they have already closed?
No. Not easily within the system. Once you've closed the document, they are listed here as closed. So there's very minimal that you can do on deleting a document. You can go into the database and delete it there. Like, our help desk could assist with deleting them there. The one piece I do want to say with this is that even if you do go in and delete a document, if I go in and I can delete a closed document, it won't undo if it's a receiving or DSD, it won't undo the inventory that was added to your system. You'd have to go and make an inventory adjustment to negate all of those out of the system, and then we could go in and delete the document. I guess in like the SQL database, but in the interface, there's no way to do that because they don't want the misconception that if you delete a document after it's closed, that it would undo the inventory that was added when you close the receiving or DSD document. You can delete an open one. If you accidentally open a receiving document and you didn't mean to, or you received a crazy amount of merchandise that you accidentally didn't mean to, you can come in. There is a delete option right here while the invoice is still, while the receiving document is still open. There's also up here under document, there's the ability to delete the document as well. But once it's closed, that's no longer an option, but we can assist you by deleting it out of the database and helping you do the inventory adjustments to get rid of the inventory that was added when it was closed, if it was receiving or DSD.
Okay. The next question there was just a follow-up to that one, Jen. How would they go about doing that inventory adjustment to correct the inventory? I'm not sure if we want to answer that here or if we should maybe follow up on that one.
I'll just show really quickly. If you go back actually out to where we were under buy, underneath the drop down, we were under buying. Underneath that is inventory. You can go into do an extended module with this inventory, go into items, and then here's where there's an adjustment. So you can just come in here and you build an adjustment document, and then you were just going to scan in the items that you want to do an adjustment on. So you can double click, it'll show all the items, or you can type it in here. And then you would just say what you need to adjust. So I need to adjust my coffee by 2 units. Since it's 0, it's going to go to -2. By default, adjustments are negative. So right here, I have a count of 5, and I need to adjust this as 3, and then I just do 3, so my new count will be 2. And then once I'm done with this, I can go into lines, just like actually with the same documents. We were just looking at items line. Just shows me the ones in this document, this adjustment document. And then when I close and submit the adjustment document, that's when it affects inventory. So kind of a quick overview. I can go over that better with somebody if off.
Okay, perfect. So just the one more here, following up on that larger order question that was coming through, Jen. They're clarifying a little bit more. So this would be one truck with multiple pallets to the order. How do you best tell which items you've already verified on the created purchase order? If the quantity was on the lines already, how do you tell which ones you've already put your eyes on and which may have not shown up yet? And again, maybe
So
in the
say
interest
this was
of,
created.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this was created from a purchase order. So you did the purchase order with a large amount of items on them, and then you're scanning to make sure that all those items were in on the purchase. I understand now. So it sounds like following that flow where you made the purchase order, now you brought it in as a receiving document. So, I mean, back in here, so we would build our purchase document from a closed order. As you're going through, and of course I picked one, I only have a handful of items. As you're going through and you're scanning the item, you can come in and you can see which ones, if there have been any variances, how many were on order and how many units you received. That would be one way that you could double check that it has been counted and it's been accounted for. You can also have them check it. If they're going to be doing this with a lot of items, like you're talking about, like I'm assuming like hundreds of items, you can come in and you can have them, and it's available on the handheld as well. Everything I'm showing you is also available on the handheld as well. You can have them actually confirm it right here and who confirmed it. So you can have your operator just double check the confirmation and confirm that they have received it. So you can, You can have it right here. Usually it's just going to be the operator that's logged in. Since I'm doing it in the back office, it is showing it as a drop-down menu, or they can just type in their operator number as they're verifying it right here. That would be the best way to do that, especially if you're talking about very large orders. So that way they scan it. Yep, I got the correct amount in. They would just put their number in, and then they can go to the next, scan it. Yep, that's how many, put their number in, scan it, put their number in. So that way you can go back and see who confirmed that they received this in. Like I said, and this is also available on the handheld. So if you're using a hand scanner, it's a little bit easier because you just be scanning the item, checking, and it would have the cases that were ordered. They're confirming that, then they can just go ahead and click on the box with their operator number already logged in and go to the next one, And that way you can come back and check all of the ones that have that confirmed. As long as they have something filled in the confirmed, you know it has been checked.
Awesome, Jen. Thank you so much for covering that. I think we answered their question. So with that, I know we're coming up on time now, so I want to go ahead and thank everyone for your questions and for attending today's SMS learning session. For any non-STCR customers on the call today, if you do have more questions about SMS or STCR, please do not hesitate to send an email to myself as shown on the screen here, bend@stcr.com, so we can coordinate the appropriate follow-up for you and your team. For all of the current customers, we appreciate and value your business and look forward to helping each and every one of you with your retail technology needs moving forward. Please do not hesitate to email us or call our 24/7 help desk so we can continue to assist you properly. As mentioned at the beginning, the webinar will be available after today for you and other members of your team to be used as a future reference and refresher on the topics covered. Our next session will be on May 25th, where we'll be going over reporting within SMS. We hope to see you all there and at our other upcoming webinars on self-checkout and electronic shelf labels. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoons.